listening to the Omni Athlete podcast, your source of peak performance techniques and actionable practices from the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. Join host Rich Walcolf, longtime NFL sportscaster for the San Francisco 49ers, on a journey to access your peak performance state and unlock sport as a transformational human experience. Welcome to Omni Athlete.
Well, Michael Spino, you have been at this game of running and the psychology and spirit and mindfulness of running for most of your life. And I don't even know where to begin other than the spirit of running. What is the essence of the spirit of running?
Well, I mean, I think it's to have an internal experience as well as a physical experience. And I wrote an article really before I even got involved with Esalen, which was called Running as a Spiritual Experience. And it just kind of came out of me. And it was a run that I took with a couple of friends of mine that was in a difficult time period in our lives. And I sort of broke through into an altered state of consciousness. And I was able to write it down like it was 3 years later, but I wrote it right down. And it instantly got published in a lot of different places, the Harvard Review and different places. And that was kind of my first indication that there was this other element to running, that there was some spiritual aspect that could enter at any point in time. And I think from when I first came to Northern California, and I worked in a school called Other Ways, and we were sort of playing, having poetry and having the kids run and talk about their inner, spirit. And in 1973, I started coaching Michael Murphy. He was actually the first person I ever coached.
Wow.
And it was an incredible experience. We would run. He would show me meditation things. I would, I coached him, and he got really good in a sort of a year and a half. He was like one of the best in his age group, and actually in the whole Western Hemisphere. But he paid me back by teaching me how to meditate, calling me at night, talking to me on the phone. And it was an incredible experience. And we touched on a lot of different things because we experimented with long sessions and meditating and running. And that was the basis for a lot of things. And then in 1974, we brought Percy, who was the greatest coach in the world then, to Esalen, and he did a lot of different workshops. And we followed that, which was, I think, maybe the biggest experience. It was just called a 6-week program. And people were in that program like Bruce Nelson, still, one of my best friends. And the idea was we had a running group, and every Saturday we brought a new person in, like George Leonard and Bob Nadeau and Al Wong and Michael. And then we added those elements to the running program. And that's how I came up with the Beyond Jogging, the Inner Spaces of Running. And I wrote that book with Celestial Arts because Michael and George were publishing with them at that point. And it did really well. It was in the bottom, but one of the 3 on the New York Times best-selling list. I think it was like 23rd or 24th, beyond George Sheehan and the Complete Book of Running. And it was just like running just exploded. And then I was just, I was so excited about being able to share that with other people that I just kept on talking to people and then starting the workshops. And there was 18 months there where, it was all over the place. It was like your 15 minutes of glory kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I had, when I was a kid, I had a high school cross country. I ran high school cross country, but we didn't have a team. And so people said, "Oh, you don't have a team, you poor guy." But it was a benefit to me. I trained with the college teams, and then I was, I was one of the best in the state, and then got a scholarship to Syracuse, and so that got me, real involved in the academic part as well. I wasn't from a very good high school, so it took me a while to sort of catch on to things. But then I started to get good grades and ended up starting research on the mental side of sports. My main area is event rehearsal and how you build up to a big event, like a championship boxing match or a big cross-country race or the Olympics. And I started that research in Kenya, but I couldn't get it done because of the tribal conflicts and things like that. So I transferred to, very lucky to meet some very nice people, and my background that I worked in the United Nations for sports development and peace. And then what I was able to do is transfer to the best research school in Europe, outside of France, outside of Paris. And I was able to get my PhD in this area. And I had some great mentors besides Michael, Lars Erik Unestål, who was the first sports psychologist in the Olympic Village. I followed him. I went to all his seminars. He developed a program where you can work on mental and physical at the same time. And he did many countries. He's still alive. He's near 90. He's written 100 books. And he's really been my mentor. And I took a lot of classes from him and hung out with him. So any team I ever had, I used the mental training, the visualizations, the guided imageries, always leading towards, I had a technique. I still do it, actually, with this little team I have now. It's where you figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are in, say, a cross-country race, and then apply that to an event rehearsal that you maybe do 5 or 6 times before a big race. And it's been very successful technique.
You know, when you mentioned Michael Murphy, George Leonard, the human potential movement, breaking ground, really pioneers in the mindful athlete, which you are personifying in your teachings and your whole approach. Now, let's take us inside the essence of running. We all think of, well, if you have the right stride and the right breathing patterns, but obviously it's a lot more than that. And I won't begin to describe it for you. So I would love you to take us inside the psychology and the mental approach to enhance running performance.
Yes. Well, it's funny because I just have a new website out called The Mindful Runners. And that name is, a lot of people get excited about it. But I figured out that if you were going to get into the mental aspect of running, you probably needed to train in short intervals. And a coach I trained with, Mihai Igloy, who's a Hungarian coach, he used this technique. They broke all world records in 1955 in all the distances. And I trained with him for over a year or so. And I think the short intervals and sets are good because you can monitor the mental aspect that's going on in your mind. And you can identify things that might hold you back or things that could make it easier. So I use a lot of visualizations, and I call them active visualizations, where you imagine a rope pulling you or a hand pushing you. And I've done lots of groups putting those training elements within a kind of scheme, like a dance class kind of thing. So actually you can build up your mental capacity for the run, in the run, outside of the run, in different ways. Like if you do an active visualization, you can build that up. Now, you can build that up. If you do a guided imagery, then you can take the imagery of that and then apply it back to the run that you're going to do at a later point. But when you recognize when you're off, when you're trying to get back into center yourself, when you're warming up and you don't feel good, and you have a technique and a way to get yourself back into your best aspect, then you're becoming the mental and physical athlete. I ask coaches that I work with, I said, you're a mind-body coach if you have an opportunity or a problem and you attempt to solve it mentally and physically. Because physically, with the running, there's some people are fast, some people have more endurance and all. So you work with those aspects. Well, I noticed also, especially working with teenagers, kids have various, strengths and weaknesses mentally. Some I had a kid when I coached at Georgia Tech. Anything that happened around him, he'd still be right on in the race. He'd still do really well. And when you talk to him, he had that kind of personality. I had other kids along the way, because I've been coaching, 40 years, 30 years in university, that some kids would be just off, and you just keep on trying to bring them back to being happy, relaxed, calm, and doing it for enjoyment. And all those key words that you can put in your mind to make it enjoyable, because when it's enjoyable, then it works. And Unistall's idea was that you do the physical and the mental at the same time, and that, like in the book Peak, that you have to have relaxation at the beginning. So it's your meditation and progressive relaxation you do first. And I have a program called psychophysical development, and what it is that you go through steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3. It leads to the event rehearsal, and so that's it. So some people have it naturally. Like, I didn't plan to run that spiritual race. It's just that the circumstances brought me to that. So in every sense, you have a sense of grace that can come in anytime, and you can do, and these magical things can happen. But also, as you're preparing for it and developing the mental skills as well as the physical skills at the same time, then over a period of time, you become a mind-body athlete, and you can reverse bad things that happen. You can know what you're thinking. You can connect to your breathing, and all the things that people want to do to be more consistent and to be able to be at the top of their game.
I'd like you to expound on the guided imagery you alluded to earlier in running. What exactly do you mean?
Well, there's two different things. There's a visualization that you do while you're in motion. We visualize a hand pushing you, a rope pulling you, or, and when you're finished, you wipe away the image because you're trying to condense it into your mind so you have a positive image when you do that. The other is a sequence that you do right from the beginning. You start with the relaxation, and then you work on like body image. You work on visualizing a run at a particular exact pace. So there's different things that you do along the way, and that's what I do in my programs. Is we start with, and so anybody can do it, because the interval training, you can take 12 steps. In fact, I have called 24-step formula. That's 12 steps on the right, 12 steps on the left, in easy, medium, brisk, so that anybody can do these interval kind of things. And the thing that's interesting is all the new technology that's coming on, like Peloton and things like that. They all now are including the interval principle, where they say, you train hard for a little while, then you rest, and you only have to do 20 minutes a day. Well, that's a good advance, because it used to be people said jog 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week, and that doesn't work so well because it doesn't really adapt to the exercise heart range that works. So my program has visualizations, guided imageries, and event rehearsals that you do as you get better mentally. You move up the scale to what's easier. Like if you're working on your body image, I have people walk out in their minds to a grass place. They're up there and they try to work on their bodies where their body maybe they're not confident in, or they feel it's not strong and stuff like that. And then try to keep that imagery in different workouts. And when you can do the short intervals, you can keep the interval, because if you do an interval, it's 25 seconds. You can pretty much keep the image that you have in your mind for that period of time, and then keep on doing it over and over again to make your mental awareness that. And the guided imagery you do, and then you transfer it to your mental, your mental game.
So you have to be actively mentally engaged. And then through repetition, you can kind of let go, if you will?
Yeah, that's right. Because, I mean, you can do things that you discipline yourself to do these various things. And then once you do the discipline, it sort of comes to you sort of naturally because, as you know, great athletes, they do stuff automatically because they've done it so many times. And, the book Peak is a very good book because it shows you have to do 10,000 hours or something to really, really do it well. And it's the same thing with visualization and meditation. And when I work with top class athletes, I know they're not going to spend all the time, and I can put in 50 minutes 4 times a week that they can take all these different kind of mental components and then become a mind-body athlete.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned about interval training. My son is a personal trainer and a CrossFit coach, and he tries to whip his old man into shape. And I was telling him I was running a couple of miles, and he goes, "Dad, that's not good for you, just jogging a couple of miles." I said, "Well, I go up a hill, quarter mile up this one steep hill, but basically I'm at a relatively slow and steady pace." And he said, "You'd be better off doing 100-yard hard runs 5 or 10 times versus running."
He's absolutely, completely right. And even in my first book, 1976, Beyond Jogging, I said I'm out by the marina. People are running by just at one pace, locked into that pace. I wish I could just grab them by the neck and say, "Look, you're not doing what you can do. You can do all, you can get so much more progress." But that's a really hard habit to break in people. And that's one of the goals of this new website, Mindfulness Runners, is that you can do better in short intervals and you get in shape faster. And why are you people go out and they'll just start running, and they won't change their pace, they won't change their rhythm. They think if they stop, they've failed. Well, stopping is one of the best things because your heartbeat goes down, and you run hard, your heartbeat goes up, and if you run a short distance, you can figure out what's going on in your brain, and you can modify it. So your son is completely right.
Well, I'll tell him. I'd be happy to hear that. Not that I refuted him. I was just curious. So tell me, if you're a novice or a beginner and you want to get into better shape, you want to make the running experience more enjoyable and obviously run faster, that may be an objective for many. What would be the initial steps that you take?
Well, I have a 10-week program, and it's funny because there's a 2-week lead-in that is like without a lot of terminology. And then I got feedback from some people. I've been doing the 2-week program over and again, and I gave to my friends, and that was working. So I try to get people to run 1 mile faster over a 10-week period. And I have them run a mile, and they go into from 6 to 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes. Most recreational runners are between 8 and 10 or a little bit under. And then I give them the actual workouts every single day, what to do. And if it rains, what to do on a treadmill. And it's like a dance kind of thing. They have a 25, 30-minute workout. So many of these fresh swings, so many of these good swings. I use Eliot's terminology still because that was what I was kind of brought up with. Then I do breathing things like tidal breathing and surging with your fingers. A lot of the auxiliary things are much more effective with people that are very out of shape, because if you go run along, you go, you go faster. Or if you tidal breathe, like we were doing that one day when we were together.
Right.
If you do those things, it allows you to go faster, your heartbeat to go up, and it really helps people just getting started, or people that are running maybe a little bit, want to improve themselves. And I like starting from the mile. And we can do other things because more people run 5Ks and stuff like that, and those can get the same kind of improvement. But know exactly what to do. And the big thing, and I tell my class this, when I first came to Atlanta, I was getting paid $400, $500 a month in 1980 by the big business people in Atlanta. And the reason they liked me was, they'd be going along, I'm meeting them, and then something happens in their life. The company almost goes bust, they're away, they come back, and they say, well, I don't know what to do now. And I say, well, you're going to get back to where you were, but not the same way, not the same steps, different workouts. And I had a real sense, like I did with Michael, even when I started, I had a real sense of what's going on with people and how to build them back to what they're doing. And that's built into the programs a little bit, but I do have a sort of knack of knowing what to do in the next day and build a person back to where they were like in 7 or 8 days where they were 10 days ago. And so the body can go, the physical body and running can go in cycles, and it can build up the capacity, not only physically, but mentally, because you can be down the road in the imagery and the guided imagery, and maybe have to go back and regroup because people, they're training, especially high energy people, they're training, and then all of a sudden, oh God, I can't do that anymore. Okay, we'll go back to the relaxation. We'll go back to the progressive relaxation. I have something called full body recovery, that after a person runs, they go back into their body and they kind of relax and look at what's going on, where they're sore, where they're feeling. And it just gets, it just gets people in that very kind of mellow space,
Mm-hmm. But mentally tuning in, it sounds like so key in advance of the run and even during the run. So just talk to that aspect of it. And you want to be mentally engaged, but then you want to turn it off. It's somewhat paradoxical in some reasons.
Yes, and that's true. That's why you don't want to emphasize so much. But like I have techniques that people do, breathe, getting rid of the heaviness in their body, getting a lightness, and before they run, and say they're going out, even if they're going to run 10, 12 minutes or so. And then they take that lightness sort of into the run. And then if they're running along and they feel really bad, they're not feeling good, they can stop and they can do a recovery kind of thing, go back into their body, say, what's really going on with me? Why am I feeling tense? Why am I feeling, do some breathing into and then go again, because it's not sin to stop. People think if I stop, it's no good. Well, stopping is part of training. So that's why people, and I use something called soft eyes, that from the Aikido and things, where people have their eyes kind of closed a little bit. They're looking out and they're looking in. I do a technique, and I've got it. My daughter in my workshop. You first off visualize a big bird flying in the sky with your eyes open. Okay, then you see what would it be like to watch that big bird, but be in soft eyes so you can see the bird, but you can run too without falling down. So then you can look in and out. And if you can get into that place, even in the middle of a race or a run, like I show people is that you're running along, you're not doing good, you're hurting. You can go to soft eyes, visualize a tree, and then pull yourself up to that tree. And then you maybe get back into another energy field.
So it's a kind of a mind game that you're doing. And I remember reading your stories about these great coaches who would take Kenyan runners into a private, secluded area and get them into a trance-like state.
Right.
And before a race, and they would run like the wind.
Well, the great story is probably the greatest miler that ever lived, or one of is Herb Eliot. He was coached by my coach, Percy, who we brought over to the United States. And he told us the story about how he got Eliot to break the world's record in the mile by the biggest margin in history. And he had a process where, like 2 days before, he would kill himself in a race as a tribute to Eliot, and then he would put him in his cabin and he would talk about things like the greatest moments in the world, what it means to be an artist. And his whole idea was not just physical, just mechanical. And so Eliot, when he broke the world's record from 357 to 354, came out of this cabin after 2 or 3 days and was in this kind of trance state. And when reporters tried to interfere, Percy pushed him out of the way and stuff like that. So he got him to the line thinking big thoughts, thinking, great man thoughts, and not just like, well, first quarter of 59, what's that going to feel like? And, that's why when you watched Eliot run his great races, he didn't do the same patterns as other people. He didn't sprint when normally people sprint for the finish. He just went by his own instincts, and he was close to his instincts. And that's because Percy got him in these kind of trance-like states.
I had the privilege of calling the races on the radio in San Francisco for the infamous wacky Beta Breakers, the 7.5 mile run across the city, which would traditionally perennially be dominated by the Kenyans.
Right.
And I was in the press truck leading the race. Right behind me were the elite runners, and invariably they were the Kenyans. And to watch the fluidity, they were like two-legged gazelles. They were in a trance-like state, seemingly impervious to the winds, the crowds, the competition, everything. It was a full immersion experience that I appeared to witness.
Yes. I lived in Kenya off and on for different periods of time because I did my research there, and I coached a lot of Kenyan athletes. And if you go to the finish line in the Kenyan cross country national championships, you see people, they see people come through, and they all sort of have the same genetic tendencies. And they're not from all the tribes. There's 47 tribes in Kenya. There's only 3 tribes that are running tribes. And the main one are called the Kalajans. And they'll always be in the front of the race, and they train 3 times a day. They live in, I lived in this camp where the guy that almost broke the marathon 2 minutes trained, and
you mean 2 hours?
He almost broke 2 hours. Yeah. And the electricity broke, and the people said, "Good, we don't need electricity." So they just train 3 times a day. Have really good attitudes. The energy around them is so incredible. I loved coaching the Kenyans together because they came out with such love of running and such fluidity. I remember I used to take my guys to train in the trails in Atlanta, in the woods and stuff, and they were so smooth. And guys would come up to me after and say, "That guy looked like he's making it so easy." And I saw him come back, and I said, "Well, I can go." And he said, "He only could take 4 steps." The guy just took off.
Well, when I talk to the Kenyans, the few who would be able to articulate in English their theories and their philosophies and their approach, well, many would talk about running everywhere to school or to work back and forth. They run barefoot. They run in altitude.
Yes.
So some of it was nurtured, but some of it was nature. And then what other aspects would play into their incredible success, considering their small segment of the world population, yet they dominate road racing.
Well, I mean, the thing is, they have a big competition with the Ethiopians. So the Ethiopians sometimes are better, like some of the world records are set. They don't have the volume of runners like the Kenyans do, but we just think of them being good. But they have a lot of competition with the Ethiopians, like with Gabriel Selassie and Berkeley, who now still holds the world's record in the 5K. And they would run to school. Like a lot of times kids say, I go to run to school, and then I got an hour and a half off for lunch. I run home and get lunch and then go again. So they may run 10 miles, during a day, and young kids. And, I was there one time when LaRupe, who was their great marathon runner, and she was having these races for the 2 tribes that were robbing each other's cattle. And it was like a peace race between the cattle. And these guys would run with these barefoot and with these sandals. They ran with sandals. If you ran a quarter mile in them, you'd have a blister for the rest of your life. And they're just really hardy like that. And when you're around them, and I do energy work and things like that with people, not so much with the high level runners, but you can feel that there's incredible love of running, and they eat something called ngali, which is like their high protein type of food, and that really gives them a lot of power, and
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the diet, because at the luncheons before the Beta Breakers races with all the Africans there, they would rarely eat the heavier foods. They would to the lighter foods, even light on the grains, but it would be vegetables, the clean proteins. And what's your experience about that?
Well, that's true. I've had athletes run the Prefontaine meet, and I've been Prefontaine meet maybe 4 or 5 times. And like David Coleman, who still holds the world record in the 3,000 meters, all the American would be going in, getting the food off of the it's free food, And these guys, they'd walk in with a loaf of bread in their hand. And, so what kind of bread they have. Even my best runner would go in the grocery store on the road. So, where's the really good bread? This is him feeling, because they don't want to break out of the tradition. My best runner of all time, this guy Sila Masoe, he wouldn't eat the regular food. Like, it'd always be ungali, greens. Strangely enough, in Kenya, chicken is more expensive than beef. So that's what they eat. That stew. A lot of green vegetables, ungali and green vegetables and things like that. And that's what they used to. When I'd bring athletes over here, they couldn't get the food past their nose. It's really funny when you watch someone that can't eat the food you're trying to give them. And then, I can't eat it. And one day I discovered that what the ungali was like grits. We have grits all over the South here. So I gave the guys the grits. Yeah, this is really good. This is it. This and he goes, Coach, so, they have a lot of different, really nice habits like that.
So interestingly, in some pursuits athletically, you want to reduce your carb intake, but if you're running distances, you need the carbohydrates to fuel you, right?
Yeah,
It's a polar opposite of
exactly. Yeah, I mean the ungali has a lot of carbohydrates and good, easy to digest carbohydrates, and I've never seen Kenyans really carbohydrate load. Where you drop, you don't eat any carbohydrates, and then you build up on the carbohydrates. They don't really do that so much. Mm-hmm. They just eat a lot of those carbohydrates and drink a lot of tea. Of course, tea, and orange juice. I mean, you could go like at the Prefontaine meet, we have breakfast with David Coman. He's making like $200,000. That even that you're making $30,000. But Coach, you buy me the orange juice. It's just like big orange juice. Always want orange juice, Coach. Give me orange juice.
How about the running style? I mean, we often see the best runners in the world sort of like they're dancing on eggs. They're always on their toes and not the heel toe, which is probably the layman's way or the novice's way of running. So when you talk to address that.
Well, somebody like Bill Rogers, who was, I think, the greatest marathon runner we maybe ever had. He couldn't run in the 1980 Olympics. So we're really good friends because of the boycott. And he runs way far up on his feet. I think when you're training somebody, you don't want to change their foot plant completely too much, but a lot of it's all the way distributed throughout their body. Like a lot of times if someone's not landing right in their legs, they're actually doing something in their upper body that's not allowing them to run efficiently in their legs. My coach, Percy had this idea, galloping. I have it I have the original videos of that. Now, it's people don't gallop in the middle of races that are world-class runners, although he said they do, but it makes you come alive. The great Emil Zatopek that you probably remember from 52 Olympics, the Czechoslovakian, his arms are all over the place. Bruce Kidd was like that. So there's individual kind of things that go on with people. Like I have a kid I coach now has a little bit of asthma problem. He's only 14 years old. And I can see that his head goes up because he thinks he can't get enough air in. So I got to change his head plant so his head goes down so that the air can come in without being blocked by what he thinks he's gasping for air. So there's a lot of things that go back to the individual person and the way that they're moving, how they're wasting energy. You'll always see this kid with his arm going out like this all the time, going out like this. And it's like you're wasting energy, not going forward smoothly. The great ones you watch, like Bernard Lagat or Matt Centrowitz or somebody, the reason they're so smooth is that they don't have any wasted motion. And really some of the real great ones, especially indoors, can change their foot plant. They can be doing one thing and then switch over, and they can control how they're moving through what's going on in their legs. A lot of the Kenyans can do that too.
Yeah. So economy of motion and synchronicity with the arm swing to give you momentum. I guess your head would be forward and down a little bit, again, for momentum purposes. And then about the breathing, which is probably the most important thing that you do is running. Some would say nostril breathing would give you more oxygen and faster and better. But in some runners I've spoken with, they say, well, if you've got to sprint to the end, you'll open anything to, suck up as much air as you can, right?
I always tell people that the exhale is more important than the inhale. If you can sigh, there's a practice we do. It's a breathing practice that if you can get to the bottom of your lungs, the sigh sounds like a hollow log. Just make a sound. I can tell that's the right sound. Or you're up in your upper lobe. You're up here too much upper lobe, you're not getting full lung aeration. Cerity was really big on lung aeration. So if you're feeling like you're gasping for breath, your inclination is try to bring air in. But the best thing to do is to exhale. And that's why that's why we practice that, especially with just people starting out. And we have a thing called tidal breathing. Because what Cerity taught is every breath's not the same. Your breath is like the ocean waves coming in, and it adapts to the needs that you have for that situation. So you always key it on an exhale, because if you exhale, your lungs have to fill up. And then there was a doctor called Dr. Breath in the 1968 Olympics. Because of the altitude, he worked with the Yale track team about doing this breathing exercise so that they could double and they would run better, where it's just you breathe in and you count. But people say, well, how are you exhaling? I said, you can't exhale. If you count, you're always exhaling. So they start with 30, go to 40, go to 50. And I have a couple of kids on that are having these asthma type problems. So it's individual a lot, and some people just have no problem breathing. Like if you watch Matt Centrowitz run, he's Olympic gold medalist. His face and his whole thing looks like he has no issues. He might tie up a little bit at the end. So, he's just naturally a good breather. And other people, that's a limiting issue, and you have to work with them. So I don't think.
Excuse me, Michael. When you talked about the exhale, that's kind of counterintuitive, because if people think about getting as much oxygen in, but there's not as much room for it to go if you haven't, as you said, aerated the lung and purged the carbon dioxide.
Exactly. That's right. So that's why, people are always, I said, concentrate on the exhale. When you're in motion and you're tying up, exhale, regroup mentally. Pull yourself towards a tree. Because you see a lot of times in a race, somebody is way behind and they're laboring and stuff. And then all of a sudden they say, screw it. And they run up to the front and they get in the front pace and they actually make that adjustment and run pretty well at the end of the time. So many different aspects of breathing. We used to have this idea of finish breathing, 1 breath in, 2 breaths out. But all those things break down in a race almost immediately. You have to have a bigger concept, and that is, how do I get the most air in my body and stay relaxed so I don't pant? Because people start panting and they panic, and sometimes you just have to live with it. Some people run really well, panting and being way out of breath, but they're strong mentally, and they just say, I'm going to get to this point on the track, and I'm going to sprint at that point. I don't care, hell or come high water, I'm going to do that. And their breathing doesn't limit them because they just have a will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that would be the exception to the rule, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the breathing paralleling the ocean's waves. I used to love to run along the ocean, not thinking about the breathing, but the rhythm of the waves.
I know.
It was like a mantra. So mentally and spiritually, you get into this congruous flow that is just hard to replicate any place else, at least for me. Talk about that.
Well, Port C, where Percy Cerity lived in Australia, was right on the ocean. And they trained on sand dunes, but they trained on the beach running up and down. And, again, people go to the beach and think they have to run for 15 minutes steady. And the better thing is to just go with the ocean. The waves coming in, you're running hard, the wave goes out, you're relaxing, and just kind of go with that sort of flow ebb and the tide of the breathing. You might run really hard and you really out of breath, go up a hill, and then, rest a little while. And the sea and the ocean kind of calms you and energize you, and you stop. You stop. You don't have to just run. You stop and you regroup your mind, you regroup your energy, and then boom, you can go again. And the thing that's good is that you can train these things in steps. So people might not be so good at them right away, but if you give them the right along the way, especially people way out of shape, miracle to them sort of come back if they're just doing what they can do. 25 minutes, 4 days a week. I've had a lot of people like that. Maybe it doesn't happen in a week, but if they stick with it in 5 months, 6 months, they improve. And what happens is, I use these terminology, fresh swing and good swing. When you start to get in shape, your good swing becomes your fresh swing. So that was what was great in the second 200. You just say, run good swing. And then you've realized that after a while, it's easier to do. The fresh swing gets easier. So sometimes putting too much emphasis on the language, because what we're really talking about a lot here is the language between the coach or the mentor and the guy that's training, and how much he respects you, and watching. Like a good coach, if he's training some guy or woman for a while, they come out to the track, warm up, you can tell they're not going to do good that day. It's like the Russians used to take your blood and say, if it's acid or alkaline, we're not going to give you hard training. But you can tell. And some kids say, I want to train hard today, coach. I got a big race. No, just today's going to be easy, a little fluid, a little this. Regroup. Like somebody will run and I can't do another one. I say, here, try this a little bit. Run this slower one, this one with another pace, that one, and the body recycles itself, and then they come back and they run the fastest time they have in the whole workout. And I said, I just kind of grooved back into that, and so there's so much that after many years you're just instinctive about. You just watch.
Tell me, you were talking about the free swing, and what did you mean by that? Well,
Igloy had a language. It was fresh swing and good swing. Fresh swing is up to about 50% effort. Good swing is up to about 85% effort. So if I can watch a person run, say, and I time them, right? And I say, okay, that's a 34-second 200. Then if I say, I'm going to say to you, good swing, and when you run it, you run that time, but I don't give it to you, like 33, 34. Then it's, you have a language. When I say that, you know what I mean, and then you're doing that. Like I have videos of that, like teaching people how to do the different tempos and suggestions about how they integrate with each other, and they go from one to the next.
Hey, we were talking about running on the beach, and I'm curious, when you run barefoot, it's more likely you'll be landing on the front of your foot. And if you have shoes on, running shoes, track shoes, you're more likely to be landing more as not a total heel striker, but more likely on the back of the foot. So talk about that distinction. What makes one more advantageous?
Well, one of the things is at a beach, or if you run uphill, you run in the front of your foot. Like there's times when I've had some foot problems and I couldn't run on the flat very good, but I could run really well intervals up a hill. So on the beach, that's the penultimate place to run in the beach and up a hill or up the sand dunes. And that's the famous pictures of Serity and Eliot. So I think, Rich, the main thing is the idea, I'm going to go to the beach and I'm going to run 30 minutes. That might be okay sometimes. But the idea is to get the inspiration from the sea and the openness and the existential feeling of just, I'm just going to do this. If I like Michael always tells a story about, it was a long time ago. We were in Santa Cruz on some lecture thing or something. And we were running up the sand dunes. And I was trying to tell him, try to kill yourself. Because what a place to go. Just try to kill yourself up the sand dune, And he always talks about that, where I tried to kill him, but it's this kind of thing of just letting go. And on the beach, you can do that. And you can do it if you take a 10-minute hard run or a 12-minute hard run. It's not that you can't do that. But if you run barefoot, like all of the pictures of Sarity and Eliot running up the sand dunes, Eliot, they're always barefoot.
Now, if you're running on the beach, would you recommend the casual runner or somebody who's running pretty regularly to run with track shoes or running shoes?
I think so. I think run with the track shoes most of the time, and run try to near the sort of where the water comes out, and then sometimes run barefoot. And of course, if you can find a uphill, it's like a dune or an uphill, you don't want to cut your feet and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. Now, I generally like to run solo, and I don't run with headsets on. I like the nature sounds around me. I like the solitude. Others prefer to have, pounding, pulsating music or running with a group of people. So just talk about the mental influences and the psychological influences.
I'll tell you something, that in your life as a runner, if you're really into what happens energetically, you might have 3 training partners your whole life. I had my and the habits of those people perfectly. Like in college, I had a kid named Marty that was my training partner. And when we met, we'd meet at 7:33, not 7:32. I'm a little upset at that time. But I knew him, sometimes he'd get depressed and he'd want to stop. And then we'd just stop because he got depressed. With Michael, he could run downhill faster than anybody I've ever met. I don't know what it is. Maybe he just abandoned me and I'm just going to go. He could fly downhill. And we knew each other, like when you're really close, you don't have to say everything to the other person. Sure. When he's having a bad day, a person's struggling, he's breathing and stuff, but you're going to pull him through because you did it 10 times before. So I'm sure there's fun in running in these larger groups. But Sarity always said that Eliot was so great because he ran alone a lot of the times. He would run on the beach and he would hear a bell. He would visualize a bell. And when he heard that bell, he would go like a bat out of hell, And I think sometimes in training, people that train alone run slower times in training, but they run faster in the meet, Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you're training, you have, like I do now, I have like 4 14-year-old kids that are pretty good. So one's faster, one has more endurance, one has this. And you switch them all around, and that the running in the group has to do with what you're trying to accomplish. Speed with one person, endurance for another person. And so, you can run together in a group. I mean, the Kenyans run in big groups when they run really slow. In the morning, they may run 7-minute mile pace in a group of 20 guys, just kind of like running easy. And there's all these now recreational running things where people get in a big group and run. And that's a very nice social kind of thing, But if you're really thinking about how to train a person so that you're going to get the best out of them, or if the person's commitment is to some spiritual aspect of this interaction has to be thought of very carefully, because we know from George Leonard that there's energy between people and stuff. And you want to bring people together that have a simpatico with each other. Like every once in a while you train in a group, even kids, and you see 2 of them are really training great together. And that really, moves your heart as a coach. It's working. They're helping each other. One guy's really pulling on the other. And so I think it's not one statement. Are you running groups? Or you run this? I think the coach makes a commitment. This is a spiritual thing. Like Sarity's great books, his great introductions. This is not running. This is an art form. This is the development of the person as their highest self. He was saying those things in 1950s. And that's why everybody you're around who's influenced, you can throw away a thing and just run in a group a lot of times. But the main aspect of what you want to accomplish when that's your goal and is a deeper question.
Right. And of course, as you go into the more competitive elite competitors, then it's the question of the psychology of the race. Do I lead? Do I go out strong? How do I handle adversity? How do I handle the finish, the kick, and variety of things like that? That changes the whole story.
Well, the amazing thing is in the last 5 or 6 years, the strategy has changed dramatically. It used to be that people hung back. They were either a front runner or they kicked. Now these great experiences like the guy that won the 5 and 10, the Somalian kid from London, and Farrow, Mo Farrow, people can't beat him any different way to run against him. When they want to, they slow the pace down. And then people know if I try to go in front of him, he's going to kill me. But if I don't go in front of him, he's going to beat me anyway. So, and Matt Centrowitz does this too. They go to the front and they slow it down. And the strategy is, that's why all these big races in the Olympics, like in a mile, they're running 50 points for the last quarter, because they're all trying to play off each other. And everybody thinks they can outkick everybody else. But the real masters like Mo Farrow and Centrowitz and these guys, they'll control the race 4 or 5 laps from the finish. And other people don't know what to do. Even the good announcers like Masback and Craig Masback said, there's no way they're going to beat him. There is no strategy to beat him, because he can sprint hard in it, he can slow down, he's got this or that. So people have all these different aspects that they play. Not like the old days where you were a front runner or a kicker. It's more complex than that now. Yeah,
I guess that's the evolution of the runner.
That's right.
As we speak. Well, as we wrap up this fascinating hour, Michael, it's been unbelievable.
It's so wonderful.
A amount of information about this stuff. You can feel it exudes from your spirit and soul.
Thank you.
We call these interviews the Omni Athlete, and the totality of the mind, body, spirit. And when you think of the runner and what you as a coach and runner are trying to convey, how would you characterize the Omni Athlete runner as we conclude?
Yes, I think that what we've been coming to is the name Omni. It's a person making a commitment to the mind-body connection, and making a commitment that the energy that you experience, that what you transfer to other people, all the things we've been talking about today, is the objective, not just running. You can improve your time, but you can improve yourself by all the different aspects that you put into this, so that you grow as a person. The Omni coach or the Omni athlete, this is the idea of it. You grow as a person as you go through these different phases of training and life, and how they interchange with each other, and the lessons that you learn, and how you can apply a mind-body approach to those life lessons and sport lessons that make the experience a really important and deep one for you. And that's what that kind of means.
That's beautiful. Well said, sir. Thank you. It was very enjoyable.
Well, thank you, Rich. It's always great talking to you.
As always, guys, if this content is adding value to your lives and specifically to your performance as an athlete or as a coach, please, please, please like and share our content so that we can grow this community. That's what we're after right now, is just growing this community and helping as many athletes and coaches as possible access the teachings on peak performance, mental and emotional self-management, spirituality, love, achieving what it feels like to be in the zone and in a flow state, and everything that it is to be an Omni Athlete. We want to get this message out to as many people as possible, and we need your help to do it. So if it's adding value and it is truly helping you as an athlete or as a coach, please like and share this content. And until next time, guys, mind open, eyes wide, feel into it, play.